The Utah Jazz have been one of the more interesting rebuilds of the last couple of years after getting pieces like Walker Kessler, even a guy like Lauri Markkanen who blew up onto the scene. Now the question for the Utah Jazz is, after getting Ace Bailey with the 5th overall pick, the development of players like Isiah Collier and Brice Sensabaugh, how good is this rebuild going? And what direction does this team take to maximize the young talent they have, while still making sure they continue to develop as many players as they possibly can? And I think that all starts when we look at an unfamiliar name in this rebuild process, and that name is Brice Sensabaugh. Brice Sensabaugh had a actually phenomenal sophomore season, taking a jump in just about every statistical category for the most part. Sensabaugh really showed that with an increase of only 2 minutes, an exponential leap as a scorer. And I think at that point that's crucial because now you will have a 21 to 22 year old who you can ultimately roll out with this young core of, Bailey, Collier, George, Kessler. I think Brice Sensabaugh is a big piece to this puzzle, because ultimately you need to make sure that you have the ultimate role guys to possible all-stars. Now, am I sure that Sensabaugh is an all-star caliber player? I wouldn't think so. But at the end of the day, I do think that this guy could be a legitimate staple piece for this team, because he provides you spacing and three-point shooting. He can still get to the rim when you need to. He's not an incredible defender, but he's not a cone. I think he is literally the perfect glue guy for this team. And you might be going, well, Emser, why are you talking about the glue guy first? Because to me, with every rebuild in the NBA, whether it be a team like the Wizards, the Hornets, I believe you need a legitimate glue guy to help make sure that you can get over the hump. Right? Like, look at a team like the Thunder. You have guys like Jalen Williams, the center, not J-Dub. You have guys like Caruso. Obviously they didn't draft him, but still the idea is, with the young talent, right? Case and Wallace, all of these sorts of guys you can plug and play. And that means that your superstar, who you, in the case of a Utah or like OKC with that trade for Shea, you're hoping you can hit on that young superstar naturally through the draft. And then at that point you can continue to compliment him. Now, I'm not sure if the Jazz necessarily think that Ace Bailey is that superstar in the making, but I do think that now they have a little bit more spacing for Bailey to operate, so maybe they can maximize his potential with this team, and especially under a really good coach like Will Hardy. But I think that Brice Sensabaugh is showing legitimate signs of development for this upcoming season, and if he takes the leap, I think if he could get you to 15 to 17 points a game, which is a 4 to 5 point jump in production, I think this rebuild's already going in a tremendous direction, because now you're starting to figure out who's sticking around for this. Who are we keeping and who are we moving on from? And another guy I think that's stapled himself to be a keep is Isiah Collier. Collier, as a rookie, actually had a bit of a breakout relative to what he was. I mean, again, this guy was second to last pick in the first round. But when you look at his overall numbers, giving you 9, 6, and 3, while the shooting splits are horrible, quite frankly, right? I mean, 25% on, 2 threes a game is horrendous, and 42 from the field is not very good. But I think there's still better signs of growth and development with him versus what's been going on with like a Keontae George. And maybe that's because Keontae George is ultimately more of a shooting guard and isn't necessarily that true point kind of guy. But I think for all of these rebuilds, it's crucial that they make sure they have that point guard of the future. Because I genuinely believe this. If the Celtics never get a Drew Holiday or traded for a Derek White, guys who could help facilitate the offense, they don't necessarily need the ball all the time, but they can help facilitate it so that guys like Tatum and Brown can move and operate, they never win that championship. They never, I believe, would capitalize on that Tatum and Brown duo. So I think it's important for every team. Look at what the Magic just did for Desmond Bane. They have realized, I think a lot of teams that are growing and developing realize they need that point guard of the future. It doesn't mean they got to be Steph Curry. It doesn't mean they need to be, Luka. But you've got to be more than just a meh starter to six man. And when you look at Collier's plays throughout the course of the season, you see him really get comfortable with the team and with the lineup. Honestly, I think he looks pretty good. And I think, again, you're going to see a jump in his production scoring wise. I mean, again, he gave you 9 already. So he's probably going to jump up to like 12, 13. And again, these are the leaps you want to see in year twos from some of these guys. And if he's giving you 13 and 6 or 7, that's really good for a sophomore player in a rebuild. And I think at that point, again, the Jazz can sit back in that front office and feel extremely comfortable with the direction of the rebuild. Because I think Collier is going to be important. Now, obviously, would you like for Keyonte George to, ultimately sort of step up? But like when you look at his numbers, right? And again, like the points are there, like he can score. The problem is that he's not very good at scoring. Like he needs 14 shots a game to give you 17 points. That's not good. At some point, now I'm not saying trade Keyonte George and you just give up on him, but I do think guys like Jordan Clarkson have got to go. I do think that this guard room needs that growth. And with sort of certain vets there like Clarkson, you're kind of messing up everybody's minutes. But I think Collier is looking to be that point guard of the future for this team. And honestly, when you look at the film, I think it's pretty evident that he can be that guy. And then finally, I actually want to talk about the big man, Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler is coming back from a rebound season. And the only reason I say that is his rookie year, I think we all remember the discourse. Oh my God, they traded Rudy and they essentially got another Rudy in return, right? Because when they made that trade with the Minnesota Timberwolves, they got the draft pick that ultimately gave them Walker Kessler. Now, the sophomore season from Kessler was not looking very good. The minutes were all over the place. He wasn't even starting as many games as before. It was looking extremely rough for this squad. This third season from Kessler, I think, shows that he's most likely going to stick around. I mean, he led the league in offensive boards, right? And that's with guys like Wemby still in the league. When you're giving me 11, 12, and 2 blocks a game on 66 from the field, I think at that point, I don't get how you're not sticking around. That pick and roll action that you could run with Collier, you could help with Sensabaugh, even get a guy like Ace Bailey his space. I think Walker Kessler is clearly a guy that could stick around because I think, again, having that defensive anchor is also huge. Because if you could have that point guard defensive anchor kind of combo, and let's say Ace Bailey becomes a superstar. Now, I'm not as high on Ace Bailey as a lot of people were coming into this, that college season and into the draft, but let's just say he becomes that superstar caliber player. He becomes a top 20 to 15 caliber guy. You would have Sensabaugh, Kessler, Bailey, a combination of George and Collier. I think that squad could really develop. I think we have found the core pieces. And in this rebuild, the question is, how good is this rebuild? Like, how much do we trust in this Utah franchise organization front office to continue to develop correctly? And I think in some ways we've already seen the right signs, right? When you see that they already had re-signed, their head coach, who I personally am very high on, and Will Hardy. I think that they've already shown signs that they kind of have the right idea. They know who they can help build around. And now that we know that, let's get into the final part of how good is this rebuild. In these rebuild report videos, normally I would go away and give my grade for a team. And for this Utah Jazz team, I'm going to give them a B. I don't think it's quite an A+ yet because, again, we need to wait and see one more year. If Sensabaugh continues to make a leap, if Isiah Collier makes another jump, and I think an even bigger condition would be if Keyonte George figures it out as an efficient scorer, then I think this rebuild could be an A+. Because essentially, you will have drafted your glue guy in Sensabaugh, your defensive anchor of the future in Kessler, your point guard of the future in Collier, a scoring two-man in Keyonte George, and then if Ace Bailey works out, you can have a really strong core 5 who, at some point too, if you're like, okay, Sensabaugh got his value up, we could trade him and try and get a bunch of pieces that fit. Or, hey, Bailey's been good, but, there's this team that wants him, and they'll give us 3 firsts, and we can continue to grow around this core. At that point, the ball is in Utah's, court. It's in their hands. And I think that for this rebuild specifically, things are looking very bright because I actually like the way that this team has been drafting for the most part. Hopefully a guy like Cody Williams can really step it up. But obviously there's no guarantee of that. It's the NBA. It's a whole different level. But again, I genuinely think that what this team can accomplish, not necessarily record-wise this year, but just in terms of development-wise, they are one of the brighter rebuilds in the league, to me. Again, I get it. I know they're not close to taking those next steps. But at the same time, I'm going to be honest with you guys. and we're going to do revisionist history. I'm sure there'll be people typing in the comments, oh, it's not the... We thought the same thing about the OKC Thunder. About 2 to 3 years ago, I do not believe if I told someone that they were going to be this dominant force in the NBA, have one of the best records, one of the best defenses in NBA history statistically, no one would believe me. And I wouldn't blame them. Because I would have to tell them, Chet gets hurt for a bunch of those years in between, right? So it's not even like Chet's continued to grow and develop every year. You still had guys like Giddey and Shea and their little odd tandem that couldn't really work out together. Again, like, these young teams are meant to sometimes take a leap off the page that we're not expecting. That's what happened with Memphis. That's what we just saw happen with OKC, Indiana. Some of these teams, I don't think we as basketball fans and watchers and enjoyers were like, man, this team next year, they're going to go on this deep. No, but I think Utah is at least 2 to 3 years away, but that's okay because they're getting the right foundational pieces. Let me know what you guys think of the Utah Jazz rebuild. As always, this was Emster Knows Hoops. Don't forget to leave a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think. And that's why I do what I do here. I love having these conversations about the game and that we all love, hopefully, if you're clicking this video. As always, guys, this was Emster Knows Hoops. Don't forget to have a great rest of your day. Peace out.